Hey, everybody. Good to have you back. The hell's in my mouth? What the hell's in my mouth now? Anyway, welcome to the show. It's 6:59 p.m. and 51 seconds. We've got a Wednesday night show that I'm really excited to do with you all. I really am excited to do it with you all. But there's a little bit of everything in this one. We're going to be talking about Tartaria, a topic that has popped up a lot over the years in dribs and drabs. We never had a night really dedicated to it. And I think I have a really good guest to do all of that from soup to nuts, as they say. We'll start at the beginning and we will just work our way through. And after our guest, Jack, from the Observation Lounge, leaves us tonight. Let me just say that. There was a name change. I know I've been saying Jack from Picard's Ready Room. Picard's Ready Room. That doesn't mean anything anymore. There's been a name change. And I actually like it. It's good. The Observation Lounge. So we're going to talk to Jack a little bit about what he does at the Observation Lounge, which is a very nice channel on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you can go right into the description right now and click on through and subscribe to him. But he's going to be with us in about 15 minutes or so, and we are going to talk about the hidden, lost, conquered global empire of Tartaria that has, it's either completely ridiculed, it is received lukewarm, it is raved about, and, it's just one of those things that I like being in those mystery zones. I like keeping myself in the mystery zone. That's what it's all about there for me. And yeah, all right. So then that's what we're going to do. In the second half, I have some good stuff for you. To amend everything that we're doing here. Not only will take calls to see what you guys and gals think about this or that, but there is another thing here too. I have some comments from Jimmy Corsetti. I have some comments even from Robert Sepper. I got in touch with them to see what they thought about one thing or another, especially Robert Sepper from the traditional anthropology standpoint. That's a huge thing right there, and I can't wait to read that off. He approaches that from a different standpoint. So the Tartaria, how far do you think it went? Because, there's a lot of different versions here. We start talking about even religious Christian revelation here too. There's a lot of, depending on who you follow about news and talk about the Tartarian empire and it's being removed and erased from the face of the earth. There's also this underlying theme that a lot of people, talk about a little bit more than others about Jesus's millennial reign. The question of whether or not Christ ruled through this global empire for 1,000 years, and 1,000 years was the time allotted to that age, and then it was like Satan's last chance to run amok. There's a lot here. It's cozy. Like I said, it's the mystery zone. That's where I feel most at home. And also, when I'm at home, I can sneak a San Pellegrino in. Whenever I give Aurora some seltzer or some mineral water or something, she goes, "Oh, that's spicy." The bubbles are spicy to her. Anyway, so thank you for joining us tonight, and I hope you stay with us throughout the entire experience. It should be good. I have quite a few leftover bits from last night that I'd like to do, but it's not going to be happening tonight because I don't want to muddy the waters. But I do have a couple of things. First and foremost, I want to put this out. There's a friend of the show. You might know her in the chat room as Captain Wiggles. And I have a little bit, she has a son, Ben. And Ben is a young man, only a couple of years old. He has a lot of heart issues. And has a lot of surgeries coming up, and he's in a tough spot for a kid his age. And I wanted to let everybody know out there that I have this GoFundMe link. When it comes to, I know everybody's got their issues and everybody's got their problems and stuff, but when it comes to children this young, I just want to share it with you all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link in the description of the episode tonight, and I'll also put it into the Telegram and into the Gilded. And if you check it out, and I think that the family who has to relocate to Boston for about a month so that they can be close to the hospital that's going to be doing all these new surgeries on this young boy, Ben. I just love it for anybody out there with the means to take a look at it and maybe help out. If we all do it, maybe we can help relieve a little stress for a family, especially when it comes to toddlers. It's just, So I wanted to share that with you all. I'm going to put that in the description of the episode at show's end. Just have it right here in front of me, and there you go. And all the best to Captain Wiggles and the whole family. I can't wait to hear of continued healing and everything. So that's that. All right. And in the meantime, hopefully I can provide some cheap entertainment to take your minds away a little bit from the day-to-day that we all have to deal with. The expected and unexpected. Here's a little unexpected for you. A gigantic sinkhole in the middle of the ocean. Listen to this. Did you see this recently? Well, if you hadn't, now you have. This is from allthatisinteresting.com. Researchers identify Mexico's Tamja Blue Hole as the deepest ocean sinkhole on Earth. I know some of you out there are crazy enough to jump down to something like this. I know there's probably a lot of cautioning against it. But anybody out there, would you go diving into a sinkhole this deep? Would you take it to the depths? Would you take it to the limits of your human capacity? I know some of you out there are nuts, and I would. It actually goes into another thing I want to do one night. I want to talk about extreme sports. I want to talk about people who've gone out there and done extreme things, and this is one of those, because you know that this hole is going to be thoroughly explored by plenty of people. So it's now recognized as the deepest blue hole on Earth. At a depth of 1,378 feet, you can almost put the Freedom Tower in there, the so-called Freedom Tower. The Tamja Ocean sinkhole, located in Mexico's Chetumal Bay, has surpassed the competition by hundreds of feet, and experts still don't know how deep it goes. It's like Mel's Hole, but just bigger. It was first discovered in 2021 on what? Google Earth? Let's see here. Originally believed to be 900 feet deep, a diving expedition in December of 2023 showed that the Tamja Blue Hole was much, much deeper, extending at least 1,378 feet below sea level. This staggering discovery means that the Tamja Blue Hole is the deepest underwater sinkhole known to science, and nearly 400 feet deeper than the previous record holder, the Sancha Yongle Blue Hole, South China Sea. I bet you any money that they all connect somehow. Known as the Dragon Hole. There's jokes to be made all along the way. I know. I hear you. I hear your thoughts. A study detailing the expedition into Tamja was released on April 29th, 2024. I should tell Lauren that. It was her birthday. In the journal Frontiers in Marine Science, which studies authors revealed that the sinkhole's bottom had not yet even been reached, and that a complex series of caves and tunnels may be contained within it. See, this is also something that we should pass along to Brooks Agnew. How deep does it all go, my friends? I don't know. But I guess soon we will know, because there's just, you got to go somewhere with it. All right, let's see what else we have here. The Office, this is going to be whatever. Just for those of you out there who like The Office, there is an official spin-off that's in the works now in this country. And here is the name of the game. It's set at now a dying historic Midwestern newspaper instead of a dying Northeastern paper company. The Office spin-off is officially happening on Wednesday. Peacock said that the untitled new comedy will hail from Greg Daniels, who adapted the original NBC show, and Nathan For You co-creator Michael Coleman. So they're going to be, I guess, trying to duplicate the character roles and how they balance the show and who knows what else. But it's going to be in a Midwestern newspaper. I'm not going to watch it. And something tells me, like it usually does, that they're going to give this a couple of seasons just out of spite to say that it wasn't a failure and then it's just going to be like it never happened. I don't know. I just don't. It's just crazy because the people who wrote for shows like The Office in 2005 until about 2012, those same people, I don't think they could produce the same thing anymore. I don't think that those same people would allow themselves to produce the same kind of comedy anymore. You know, it's not even about assembling the same team. It's about trying to recapture the mindset we all were in 20 years ago, which is going to be 20 next year. 2005 that The Office came out. But still, there's that. All right, it's 7:10. Let's get this show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, there are a few things to let you know once again. Send in super chats on the Rumble Rants, on quite frankly, superchat.com. Of course, first and foremost, I always check the gold pills on quitefrankly.tv first. But send them on in. I check throughout all of them. And of course, tonight is going to be one of those nights where I want not only questions, but I want skepticism. I want, challenge the theory too. I'm here to learn, but I also want this to make sense. I want this to pass all the sniff tests. And of course, how far can we really go? But with the time we have allotted to us tonight, become a part of it. I'm not set up to take calls in the middle of an interview just yet. It's one of those last bucket list things that I need for the show. I will figure it out. I will figure it out eventually. But become a part of the show and contribute in that way tonight. Actively in the chats and through the super chats. I will be checking them. Jack is going to be on with us in just a couple of minutes, and we will see you soon. So don't go anywhere. BRB.
You tune in at your own enjoyment, because it is the best show since the beginning of time. It has technological advancements and a more sophisticated approach. But like every great awakening that has preceded it, it has one iron rule. Logic is a friend and truth is essential. You are now entering, quite frankly. Now take off your pants. And jacket.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's rock!
19th century, they're all a part of this. Where world fairs, then they between that and world wars, or even major fires like the Chicago fire of 1871, and any other major catastrophe that has flattened American cities or Western cities around the world, this starts becoming part of the story. Where this was an erasing of the marker board, as they say. Just taking it all away and starting from scratch to do away with a civilization that was there to replace it with a new one. Controlled by whom and for what purpose? We're going to have to talk about all that tonight. Yes, we are. And we're going to be talking about that with Jack from the Observation Room. Now, I've been plugging Jack's appearance over here for a while now. We had to reschedule it once, and I've been saying Jack from Picard's Ready Room is going to be on with us, and some of you probably went out there and was looking all over the place for Jack in the Picard Ready Room. But guess what? I'm not nuts. He changed the name, and you know what? I'm glad he did. The Observation Lounge sounds really, really nice. Welcome to the show, Jack. How you feeling tonight?
Thank you, Frank. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, hey, it's great to have you on finally. I hope all is well. We had to reschedule because that nor'easter that went through, us over here in the Northeast. And thankfully, everything was all right by you. But you know what? should ask you, because I think you might have been in the path of the eclipse too. How did that hit you?
I was actually in Boston on the day of the eclipse, believe it or not. I was checking out the Boston Public Library, and I went to a show at the Boston Conservatory. So that was a blast, but we kept our eyes down and didn't look up at the eclipse.
You just kept yourself safe. Good.
Yeah, we saw a lot of people walking around with the glasses on. We decided not to join the crowd that day.
Well, let me ask you this: were you at the Boston Public Library on official business for the channel?
No, I was actually just on there for pleasure, but I saw some really cool stuff there. I took some cool pictures. There's this amazing mural at the top level of the public library, where it has like the Sumerian gods, the Anunnaki holding the pine cone, and fighting Osiris. I'll have to share them with you after the show, but there's some pretty amazing murals at the top of that library.
That is awesome. But this is what I'm just saying. The observation lounge. First of all, talk a little bit about that, because it's not just Tartaria that you discuss over there. A wide range of interests, and that's why when you say that you went to a public library in a major metropolitan area, I'm thinking, oh, you're definitely getting some materials together for a future deep dive.
Yeah. Well, I made the channel initially, as you mentioned, it was called Picard's Ready Room, and I was originally uploading Star Trek shorts. So I was, putting together some edits with music and subtitles and everything like that. And I originally started doing it because I watched Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm sure some of your audience is familiar with that series, and I found there to be a lot of profound and esoteric themes hidden within the layers of the episodes. And I wanted to not only bring more attention to that particular series, but it evolved into me making some voiceover videos talking about particular episodes and, just my general thoughts and ideas of what those themes entailed and, sort of the potentially esoteric knowledge that that was intertwined in them.
Well, it does oddly fit into the work that you've done talking about the Tartarian global empire theory, because that's really a story that is about one civilization building on another, going to new levels, taking a step back. I mean, and Star Trek is all about that. I mean, that even just from an observer standpoint, how many times has Star Trek brought you into situations where they're observing budding civilizations and that are just about to pop off or find their own identity?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I want to make clear in my personal view and where I'm at in this research right now is that I don't personally believe that Tartaria was a global empire. I believe that their influence was felt globally, but I found very little evidence to suggest that they traveled outside of Eurasia and the Middle East. I believe they were a giant empire whose legacy was purposely diminished and covered up by the empires that eventually conquered and annexed them. But I have found very little research in my studies to suggest that they conquered the world. There's a lot of architectural anomalies, like this unified architectural signature that we find all across the world. We have a lot of anomalies with like the 1800s American city fires, the World's Fairs, the infant incubators, all that kind of weird stuff. But in terms of the textual evidence that I've found from the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries on the Internet archives, I found very little to suggest that they actually conquered the Americas. And I've kind of, my opinion is kind of evolving on this, where, again, I think that their influence was felt globally and there are all these architectural anomalies. But I don't see a ton of evidence to suggest that this one particular empire conquered the world. But I do see evidence that there was a lost technology that was used globally, but not necessarily just the Tartarians conquering the world and creating this sort of global utopia that some of my colleagues in this community believe.
Well, it doesn't, even when I read through it all, it doesn't really seem to me as being a conquering kind of a thing. Now, obviously, because it just seems like such a benevolent kind of a network, So
right,
with
yes.
So, but obviously along the way, if you're stretching from one part of the globe to the other, there's going to be resistance from locals who don't want to change and don't want to take on your new high technology and your culture and all that. So obviously there would have to be a conquering attached to it. But it's, before we get to the beginning of this and start from there, it's interesting you led with that, because one of the questions I was going to ask you, something that bugs me, is you know, what we're describing here is almost like a situation that we're in, like a war, where civilization we're in right now, the civilization that we are living in right now, is theoretically this civilization which supplanted Tartaria. You know,
Yes.
so and the fact that what we're living in right now is being supplanted again, it's being remade, and we may not be doing a good job fighting back against the powers that be, but we're along the way, we're publishing books, we're writing personal manifestos, we're talking about it on radio, or there's a cultural imprint of those of us who see things not being beneficial for us all, and we're leaving behind stories. I was going to ask you if there was anything left behind that documented an ongoing conspiracy to wipe away the old world from these people in the 18th, 19th century that saw this slowly happening to them. I guess not.
Well, absolutely we do. We have the June 1957 CIA document, which was quickly classified when it was released in 1957, and wasn't declassified until it was forced to be via a FOIA request in August of 1999. I would encourage anybody in your audience to go on to Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever web browser you use and type in the words National Cultural Development under Communism. Go to the CIA's website and look through this document for yourselves. Particularly page 9 of this document, in my opinion, is the smoking gun of the Tartaria hypothesis. And it completely blows the lid off our contemporary narrative of this time period.
And what is it? Is there anything from there that you remember off the top of your head, like the most profound points inside the? This is people can find this in the CIA reading room. It's there. What does it say?
Yes. Yeah. So it discusses how in 1944, right at the end of World War II, the Soviet Union, the leaders of the Soviet Union, sitting in Moscow, decided to send troops around to every Muslim province within the USSR to systematically disseminate and erase the history of the Tartarian civilization, burning their libraries, killing their people, and really rewriting the historical narrative to their own ends or their own advantage.
Okay, all right. Now, okay, so then there's that, and I guess we're going to get into a little bit more detail on that one. But now let's talk about citizenry. What about the average citizen? That's did anybody? I guess what you were saying before is that there's nobody really, especially in the Western Hemisphere, that consider themselves a Tartarian or or they acknowledge Tartaria as a global kind of a culture that they found themselves a part of, because the world population of, let's say, 1900 was under 2 billion people. So I'm assuming that there's at least a couple 100 million people living under what we would theorize as being Tartarian influence. How would it be possible for hundreds of millions of people to forget and never pass down knowledge in any form to the point where we are totally in the dark on the subject in a matter of 2 generations? It seems unlikely.
Yeah, and I agree. Well, I think we should start from the top there. So,
let's do it.
Tartaria, or the Tartarian Empire, was a term that was commonly used by historians and book writers up until around the 18th century. And at that time, it was used to describe a civilization that existed in northern Eurasia that we commonly refer to today as the Mongol Empire, or later on as the so-called Golden Horde. Now, the Mongol Empire was presided over by the Khan dynasty, most famously with Genghis Khan, and his reign ended around the early 13th century when he died. And we're told by conventional historians that shortly after the death of Genghis Khan, that the Mongol Empire began to fall into disarray and descended into this supposed Golden Horde. And we're told that the Horde had it consisted of loosely organized tribes of Mongol barbarians who had no centralized leadership, no unified culture, and they were essentially brutes and marauders who lived in tents and who roamed around from province to province, taxing and terrorizing the good Christian citizenry. But this is exactly where I start to take issue with this narrative, Frank, because we know that the Mongol Empire, the Tartar Empire, whatever you want to call it, it did not fall beginning with Genghis Khan. It maintained and even expanded its territory for centuries thereafter. And we know this because we can look at events like the 1480 stand at Ugar River. We can look at the 1552 siege of the city of Kazan, or the 1783 conquering of the Khanate of Crimea, and just say logically, it doesn't make any sense that a horde of barbarians would have been able to hold control over these massive swaths of territory throughout Eurasia and the Middle East for hundreds and hundreds of years. And furthermore, when we examine the phrase, the Golden Horde, in and of itself, it doesn't make any sense either, because what civilization would ever refer to themselves as a horde or as a horde of barbarians? It just doesn't add up.
Right.
So what we find when we dig into these 15th, 16th, 17th century documents is that these people actually referred to themselves in English or in Latin as the Turks or the Tartars, and they hailed from one of the four khanates that made up the Tartarian Empire. These were the Tartar Khanate, the Chagatai Khanate, the Il Khanate, and the Yuan dynasty in China. And this was a very powerful civilization. This was not a horde of barbarians at all. Otherwise, it makes no sense that they would have been able to hold control over these giant areas for hundreds and hundreds of years. So, in my opinion, the fact that contemporary historians still use the Golden Horde as a blanket term to describe all of the civilization's reign from the 13th century onward, it's not only inaccurate, Frank, but in my opinion, it is a disgrace to history and a disgrace to the truth.
So as far as the peak goes, because, you know, whenever somebody is just talking about this loosely, obviously the peak would be a global civilization that has been established. But as far as the peak, because if you're coming from the standpoint that it really never left the initial part of it, and it really never left that part of the world, how big did this get? I have a couple of old maps here. I don't know if this is the extent of it all. Take a look at this. You let me know what are we looking at here?
So that is Eurasia and part of the Middle East, as well as China under the Yuan dynasty, where, you know, this is contemporary Russia and expanded out of Russia as well. And then if you look at the Russian imperial flag, for instance, you see the symbol of St. George on his white horse stabbing that very same black Zillant that you had on the screen just a moment ago, stabbing that very same black dragon. And so a Zillant is actually a chimera of a dragon, a wyvern, and a griffin. And we know that this was Tartaria's symbol, not only from all the flag charts and maps that we find in our research, but Dutchman Karel Allard, he was a 17th century researcher and book writer, and he wrote about visiting Kazan and seeing the flag, this very same flag of the black Zillant on the yellow flag flying over the former palace of the Tartar Khan. So we have a lot of references to suggest that this was their symbol, this black Zillant with the curly tail, and we see this all over the place. We see it. I mean, I have it on my mug right here. So
there it is.
One notable example that, you know, really actually sparked me to look into this research further when I was first starting was in the Church of St. George in Naples, Italy, where it is a giant mural of St. George and the Dragon hidden behind a big painting that swings out. And it was only rediscovered in late 2022.
I remember this. I remember this right here. Yeah, I think we talked about that. It surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And including myself. And I didn't realize what this symbol meant initially. And I remember researching it for hours. And I eventually got to the point where I'm like, I guess I'm just not going to figure out what this means right now. I'll have to put this on the back burner. And a year later, I started stumbling across the Tartaria research, and it was like the can of worms had opened. So that symbol of St. George and the Dragon hidden behind that painting is actually a metaphor, a clear metaphor, in my opinion, to the Holy Roman Empire, the Papal State, and the Russian Empire's collective conquering over the Tartarian Empire throughout the last millennium.
Here, look, I found an Instagram post. So this is the
Perfect.
old. Look, this is. I remember this getting around, removing it, and then in the back of it, there you have it. Look at that.
Yes, and they date this mural back to the 16th century, which is right around the time of the 1480 stand and the 1552 siege of Kazan. So it makes sense why we start seeing these adaptations of St. George and the Dragon with a depiction of the Black Zillion of Tartaria on them. So we not only see it in that depiction, in this hidden mural, but also we see it in the Russian imperial flag as well.
Okay, so then let's take it from there. How do we get from there to the rest of the world, where we're talking about many continents? I don't know how many. I've read from people that like there's never anybody that gets to. It never gets very much more south, but there's always talk, like in the South Africa or anything like that. But there's always talk about so many consistencies and eerie consistencies among ancient civilizations on all of whether it be North America, South America, Asia, where we have so much that seems to be interlinked and interconnected, especially during a time in our history that we supposedly had no contact from one hemisphere to the other. Is Tartaria, in your estimation, that missing link to what people are always wondering about, whether there was a lost global network at least that connected all things?
Well, one of my favorite YouTubers, his name is Lucius Aurelian. He talks about the 5 eras theory and talks about how there were these different eras of civilization that were eventually wiped out by cataclysms. I think people, Frank, are starting to wake up to the fact that history is probably not linear, where we evolved from cavemen into hunter-gatherers into anatomically modern humans. We're starting to wake up to the fact that it's very likely that humanity has risen and fallen many times, and we've been wiped out by cataclysms repeatedly. So I think in my summation, these civilizations like that we see in ancient Egypt or ancient Sumer, and this unified pattern where we see pyramids in Egypt, and then we see the same type of pyramids over in South America, Teotihuacan, Mexico, and we see I forget the name of it, but it's the 3 doorways where it's the 2 small ones on the side and the big one in the middle. We see that signature all across the world. And I think that was one of the first civilizations. I would separate Tartaria personally from that, because we start to see the architecture evolve in a way where we see the Greco-Roman style of architecture, so to speak. I mean, who knows if it was really the Greeks or the Romans who actually, came up with this architecture. But the point is, we see a unified architectural signature all across the globe. The same type of buildings being built in the 1800s from the bottom tip of Argentina to the very top of Canada, Europe to the Middle East. We see it everywhere. Even in China or Japan, we see remnants of a previous advanced civilization in my summation, and a technology that has been lost.
Yeah, I'm actually pulling this up right now. I had a couple of tweets from a friend of the show, Jimmy Corsetti, and here's what I
love Jimmy.
He puts this out here again. You already mentioned a couple of areas in the world here. He asked this back on April 25th. He said, "Are we being lied to about our ancient history? Transoceanic sea travel was not possible until 1492, when Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue." And here you have at least just the mason work from Peru to Italy being so eerie in its relation. Now you can say, well, hey, this is a prime example of masters of their craft using whatever materials they had to make it fit and to make a wall cohesive and all that stuff. But again, here's a little bit more. He goes on to say, there's no evidence of a lost ancient global connection across vast oceans and continents. Are you sure about that? Here's 4 continents around the world. Again, Peru, Egypt, Japan, as you said, Turkey. It's all, and of course, Turkey is right in the center of everything that you're talking about right now, no?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, this is just another example of this unified architectural signature that we find everywhere. And there's no real contemporary explanation for that, that conventional historians can offer, in my view. I don't find anything that they say convincing about, yeah, here's another example, these pyramids that we find everywhere in all around the world during a time period where we are told there is no global civilization and basically no communication between these different cultures.
Yes. Okay. So now when you look at this, if you're going to apply it to what we're talking about tonight, then you start really asking yourself, what was the height of Tartaria? What was the height of the empire? What would you set as a line of demarcation between the original setup and then what was again an influence that spread? Not necessarily one network that was ruled by a small group of people, but where would you draw the dividing line between what started in the East and then what became a global influence?
So, in terms of the height of the empire, most of the textual evidence and books that I've read have pointed towards Kublai Khan, the grandson of Genghis Khan, being sort of having the height of the empire at that point, where he founded the Ilkhanate in the Middle East, largely with the Ottoman Empire. And at that point, they were holding not only the Yuan dynasty in China, but they were also holding much of the Middle East, the Ilkhanate, and then they were holding basically all of Eurasia, apart from Europe, of course.
Okay.
And we see, so I think where we kind of start to see the peak and the downfall was at the 1439 Council of Florence, which was a reunification between the Eastern and Western churches, Christian churches. So this was, not only an alliance between the Vatican and the Russian Orthodox Church. A lot of people don't realize this was a reunification of the military might of the Holy Roman Empire and the Russian Empire, the soon-to-be Russian Empire. They were the Moscovians at that point. So when, Ivan III pulled up at the 1480 stand at Ugra, facing off with the forces of Ahmed Khan of the Golden Horde, he didn't only have the Moscovian forces behind him. He had the whole might of the Holy Roman Empire behind him. So, again, this is another example where it's like, it makes no sense to call this civilization the Golden Horde, because how else would they have been able to hold Russia's capital city of Moscow for 250 years, from 1238 until 1480? Yet we're told that this was just barbarian tribes that held control of this city.
Yeah.
It just doesn't add up in my view.
I know. Well, the use of barbarian has always been very dubious, especially
Yes.
you move on through history. Like, oh, well, what is a barbarian? You're thinking about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You're thinking about somebody with a club and a loincloth who doesn't really think too much about anything. They're just swinging away, just blunt instruments. But
Right.
of course, to exist on the levels that you're describing here takes a considerable amount of sophistication.
Absolutely, and a powerful military. So, to the fact that, again, that contemporary historians still use this blanket term, the Golden Horde, today, I think is wildly inaccurate, and I think we need to change the narrative in that respect. Because, here's the thing, Frank. If it's true what they say, he who controls the past is doomed to repeat it. But he who controls the past controls the future as well. They rewrite these historical narratives not only to legitimize their own rule and diminish these previous, the legacy of these previous empires, but really to control future outcomes as well. And I think we're seeing that in real time with all the spiritual conflict that we're seeing in the Middle East today.
Okay, so then let's talk about the most identifiable parts of this theory for people. And that is that there was a uniform style of very elegant, ornate architecture throughout the world. There was very holistic and beneficial technology, secret technology that was baked into a lot of it, whether it be their roofs, the use of mercury, the use of frequency like tuning forks, just anything, bells, anything that is going to go out there to actually connect with people and be benevolent. I don't know, catalyst for some kind of a raising of consciousness in society, that there was an intelligence to the way that this was all built up. If there was no real connection, no real intelligentsia that was ruling the world, or was I don't know, maybe instructing the world on how to be a certain way, then how did we start getting this uniformity and this very identifiable type of architecture and this technology that we see popping up from continent to continent? Where do you think that the need, the drive to actually go and emulate that came from if there's no real mandate to go and do so?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you in that respect. And the thing I want to kind of draw a distinction here between everything that we just talked about with the Golden Horde and the relabeling of the Tartarian Empire to the Golden Horde, or the reclassification of Tartaria from a nation to a region. We have enough evidence to say definitively, in my opinion, that this actually happened, that there was a historical cover-up of the Tartarians to a massive extent. Not only can we just look logically at events like the 1480 stand or the 1552 siege, or look at the declassified CIA document from June 1957. I think we have pretty definitive proof to point towards this civilization and say that that there was a large scale cover up here. I mean, what other civilization have you ever heard of that we refer to as a horde today? I mean, this is the only one. So my point being, we can look at this previous civilization, this reclassification, say we have proof of this. When we start talking about the high technology, the architectural anomalies, the resonant frequencies that are encoded into the rose windows of many of these churches and cathedrals, we look at the spires and like the finials on top with the spheres, and people, including myself, speculate that they may have been filled with mercury, or they may have been used to harness atmospheric electricity, or the bell towers, the fact that all the bells have been removed from the bell towers in our cities. I mean, I can barely remember the last time I heard a bell ring.
It's true.
In an American city.
That's true right there. We used to have the bells there, the bells too. No longer. In fact, I think a lot of churches have replaced bell towers with speakers.
I know, and that's just another thing. And the thing about bells is, like, I think about them in the way, I mean, I think that they serve multiple purposes. I think that they may have been tuned to the resonant frequency of the spire surrounding them. But one use of the bells, I think, is, and it sounds kind of woo-woo, but it's aligning people's frequency together. So, for instance, when you go to a concert, like if you go to a rock concert, you're not only interfacing with the band, but you're listening and having this musical experience with the people around you. And it can really affect your mood and how you feel. And if you're all kind of, resonating at that same, consciousness, or that same, musical frequency, you connect easier with the people around you. And so, and another example is like low frequency music, like death metal, for instance. There's people go to death metal concerts and form mosh pits and beat the crap out of each other. What a weird phenomena that is. You never see a mosh pit at a classical, orchestra symphony or anything like that.
Right.
So, and I think the same concept goes to the bells. When the bells ring in a city, it aligns people's frequency in the same way that going to a concert aligns people's frequencies. It helps people communicate better with one another. It gives them clarity. And I think it elevates the human spirit in a way that, has largely been lost in our contemporary cities.
Yeah. There's plenty to be said about this with the resonant frequencies, the bell towers, the spires. We've talked about cymatics on the show quite a bit over the years, resonant frequency, how it affects people. We were just talking to Brooks Agnew last week about the ability of HARP-related technologies to just douse target populations in very agitating radio frequencies and what it will do, especially in wartime scenario, how to mix that in with psychological warfare techniques and all that. So it would make sense that a high-tech, benevolent society would take consideration of things like this into the way that they build not only their churches, but the way that they build their city halls and everything else, where there's bells chiming, there's things that are vibrating that are keeping people happy and not subdued, but calm, thinking straight, not agitated, not in a fight or flight kind of high anxiety standpoint, because that it is. I know some of the common frequencies out there: 432 hertz, 528 hertz. People go to sleep listening to these things, but then you're off by just a couple of hertz, and all of a sudden there's a discordant there's something wrong. You can feel the water in your body just starting to microwave a little bit. It's just odd. So, do you think that this was the main, when you talk about cover up in the CIA, is it that technology that was embedded in this civilization? Is that the main reason for the cover up? It can't just be because they were they built very pretty buildings. It has to be something else to it. Was it that the technology?
Sure. So, historically, emperors, empires have, you know, covered up history to legitimize their own rule, to diminish the legacy of previous civilizations, and to rewrite, the historical narrative to their own advantage. Again, he who controls the past controls the future in many ways. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why, the Tartarian civilization was diminished or erased. I mean, those are some of the general reasons. But, I want to make this point. Historical cover-ups have happened all the time. We know about the burning of the Library of Alexandria. We know about the iconoclasm in the Byzantine Empire. We know about Pol Pot's regime in Cambodia, or the Cultural Revolution in China. We know about, for instance, the January 6th protests, even in real time, with the internet shining the greatest spotlight of accountability on these things possible. The global elite, these leaders, are still trying to get away with skewing the historical narrative in real time, right in front of our faces. I mean, in January 6th, in my opinion, Frank, this was clearly a protest that turned into a riot. There was very likely agent provocateurs in the crowd. And we're being told by, slammed by MSN, saying this was an insurrection. This was a white supremacist attempt to overthrow the U.S. government. And it's like that. Anybody with eyes and a brain can realize that's not what this was. But yet they're still repeating this over and over again. So you have to wonder what's going to be written in the history books in 50 years. What is going to be taught to our children in schools, 50, 100 years from now about this event? Are we going to be taught that this was a white supremacist uprising, or are we going to be taught the facts about this?
And that goes to show why so many more people now are willing to consider much bigger lies, when so much is invested in the most petty of shit. So much is in, it makes you really think. And I was on the line on Monday night with a writer and director of some very profound short films. And I said to him that, the thing that we have now that we didn't have 24 years ago is that 24 years ago, when you looked into something like Tartaria, or you looked into any other kind of hidden history thing, a chapter of hidden history that might have been hidden or obfuscated in some way, a conspiracy theory, whatever the hell it is, cryptids, it doesn't matter. When you start thinking about that, infiltrations of the church, satanic, ritual abuse, things like that, about 24 years ago, there seemed to be a far more comfortable buffer between what was consensus reality and then, of course, the underworld of the secretive, the occult, everything that we just don't, we could never put our finger on it, but we kind of had a feeling did exist in some way, shape, or form. I think that 24 years later, now here we are in 2024, it just feels like that buffer. There's so much more resonant bleed over between those two places that it's making people say, there's way too many proof positives of the things that they told me did not exist 24 years ago. I think this slippery slope thing is not really a logical fallacy. It might just be a way things are. And you know what? Why not Tartaria? I think that's why it's at least become a very, very popular topic for group investigation these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And another example of that, is flat Earth. Like, I personally don't subscribe to the flat Earth theory, but I would never disparage somebody who does believe in that. So, we know they're hiding land from us in Antarctica. So of course it's a possibility. I don't rule that out as a complete possibility, but I personally don't subscribe to that theory. I think, we have enough evidence to suggest the world is round. But I don't, there's a lot of, NASA cover-ups, a lot of faked footage, We know about the Antarctic Treaty, for instance, where all these countries came together and decided, oh, we're not going to let anybody, go to Antarctica. Like, what is that all about? So,
I know.
We know they're hiding land from us. So I would never disparage anybody who believes in the flat Earth theory. But, at this point in my research, I don't believe that's the most plausible explanation, personally, to me. But that's just my point of view.
Well, hey, like I said, it's just the environment we're in right now. It's rife with this kind of stuff, and of course, it does keep people in the darkness sometimes, because then there gets to a point where, well, everything is a lie. We say, hey, literally everything about history is a lie. Well, I can't go that far. I can't go that far. I'm sure that so much of it, just based on the way that you tell, two friends get together and tell a story about something that they both saw at the same time, it could be different. I'm sure that things get lost along the way through just the regular means, through malevolence, manipulation. Of course, there's all that going on, but also got to try to keep yourself in orbit. But, let's now that we've gotten to the origins, let's bring this to America, because most of the popular stories out there and videos out there about Tartaria here in the U.S., it points to a time where, I guess, in the Gilded Age in the United States, coming on up into the 19th century, we had a sprawling civilization that was starting to really resemble ancient Rome in many ways, and through just very meticulous kinds of natural disasters and land flattening civil wars, and then of course world wars afterwards in the Eastern Hemisphere, but then the World's Fairs and we have to talk about the mud flood. Where do we start with all this over here in the United States? Because that's going to be most relevant to people, and I think it's going to be we need to question that the hardest.
Yeah, absolutely. And one anomaly that I find the most striking, in my opinion, is the infant incubators at the World's Fairs. They were in Chicago, they were in Nashville, they were in the Pan American Exposition over in San Francisco. So they had these buildings right in the front of the building. It had in big letters, infant incubators, come see the live babies. And there's pictures of the insides of these, and there's like 40 incubators lined up with live babies in there, and all these strangers would gather to look at the children and decide if they wanted to adopt them. It's like, where are all these children coming from? And on top of that, we have the orphan trains happening at the very same time in America, where there's like hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of children that are being imported from or migrated from the urban cities to the rural countryside, where at each stop, local townspeople would gather to look at the children, decide which ones they want to take home and use as free labor. So that's why when we see these weird, do you remember when you were a kid in elementary school and they'd show you these pictures of farming families in the Midwest from the 1800s with like 13 or 14 kids?
Yes.
And you'd see like the mother who's like 30 years old, and you're like, how does she have 14 children? It just doesn't make any sense. It turns out they were adopting many of these children to use as free labor. So it's very sad and very odd.
But what is that? How does that tie in? See, Matt, we were talking about with Matt Roski from Cultivate Elevate about this. And I mean, just as and I hate to say it because we're talking about babies here, but almost like from a circus sideshow kind of a standpoint, I remember, especially even on Coney Island in New York, there's a lot of things that you can find there. Atlantic City, the early 20th century, where babies in incubators are pretty much on display. And you're right, there's strange precedent of orphan trains all over the place. Now, you can say that it was economic hardship and people were giving up their children more often, more willingly. But when it comes to Tartaria, the seemingly I don't know, the surplus of children that seems to be the case here that people bring up when we talk about this is that it was from some sort of almost like a supernatural jump off point. It almost seems supernatural when they describe it, that at some point there was a place where society there was a fork in the road, and reality itself split, and some people were almost like raptured or something like that.
I know.
What's the explanation or the theory behind why there were so many children without homes all of a sudden?
Well, I wish I knew exactly, Frank. I mean, I don't have a great answer for you in that respect. I think the idea is that there was some sort of reset of civilization that happened around this time where, for whatever reason, there were all these orphans being auctioned off at train stops and at fairs. And, on top of that, we have things like the insane asylums popping out of nowhere at the turn of the century where, there was hundreds of thousands of people admitted to these asylums, and they were getting like forced lobotomies, and a lot of them were taken there unwillingly. So again, I wish I had a perfect answer for you in that respect, but I really don't. All I can do is kind of point at these anomalies and say, what the hell,
So then, how about the World's Fairs? Let's talk about that. When these started getting tracked around 1850?
Yeah, so the World's Fair is really odd because it's like they built all these glorious structures that were supposedly temporary, and they built them in like 6 months. The Chicago World's Fair is one example of this,
Yeah.
where many of the buildings in the Chicago World's Fair actually still stand today, and they're beautiful, and they're clearly permanent structures made out of stone or out of granite or marble. And then for some reason, half the buildings or more than half the buildings got burned down in a fire 2 years after the fair. And, I'm sure I've looked at these pictures pretty thoroughly, and I'm sure that some of them are actually temporary structures. But what I think is probably happening here is that they mixed in some temporary structures with the not temporary structures, and then they were able to use that as an excuse to tear most or all of them down.
See, that is what I've been hearing. And I gotta say, I don't know, outside of the Chicago's World Fair, I really couldn't. I'm all ears on that. We spent especially this audience, we spent a considerable amount of time studying the Chicago's World Fair, along the way of actually reading that book, the Devil in the White City, last year for one of our book club picks. And it's such a well-indexed book that we just spent a lot of time digging into the fair itself. And, what we came to realize, at least what the mainstream understanding is, that with these World's Fairs, they really were like, they pop up like Olympic villages. You put in a bid for a city somewhere in the world, they win the bid, then you have a couple of years to get things together. You get a little bit of a grant from Congress to go and build it on up. And with Chicago, it was, it wasn't even all completed on the opening day. They were still constructing it like 6 months into the opening of Chicago, of the fair itself. And Jackson Park, prior to construction, was pretty much a sand trap. There definitely wasn't anything there that looked like it was ancient Rome, and most of the buildings that were constructed in lieu of marble were constructed with staff plaster, and many of the buildings burned down, blew down from wind, and I think there's only one or two structures that are still there today, just one or two though. But when it comes to, but 1904 is usually what is brought up a lot in these dives on Tartaria. So I didn't know if there was something totally different that happened. Maybe they just learned a lot more, learned a lot from the mistakes of 1893. But 1904 is usually what people pay a lot more attention to for some reason.
That's the St. Louis one, correct?
Okay.
Or is that Chicago?
Yeah. No, Chicago. No, Chicago's 1893. So St. Louis sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one other thing is the building timelines for not only the World's Fairs, but for some of these churches and cathedrals that we find all across American cities, where there's all these anomalies. Like, they never cite a building company. They don't say where they sourced the stone from. We're told that they were built by like prison labor sometimes, or these were people on horse and buggy, and somehow they're building these architectural marvels that are super precise, have these beautiful rose windows with cymatic patterns encoded into them. And then if you look at the building narrative behind them, a lot of them hold the fire narrative. And one guy who's done a great job of exposing this is My Lunchbreaker. Are you familiar with his work, Frank?
No, I'm not.
You should really check him out. My Lunch Break on YouTube. He takes a deep dive into these buildings and kind of exposes the ridiculous timeframes. The fire narrative is in all of them. And just a lot of the anomalies surrounding the construction of these buildings. And not only that, but like we're looking at the screen right now, we have these American city fires. That is Chicago in particular, the one that it's scrolling over now. You know, we're told that this was caused by a cow tipping over a lantern in a barn. It looks like the place got hit with a nuke. And you're telling me that a cow tipping over a lantern burned down, you know, like hundreds of thousands of homes? I don't buy it personally.
You also did some really great thing. I mean, I don't know if it was you or his other thing that I was reading, but there was somebody that went into, I don't know, it was an old history book. I think Ulysses S. Grant was on the page. It was printed long ago, but even they said when it came to Chicago, they were focusing on 1871, that these buildings were made of stone and steel, and for them to turn to, again, dust. Like, for example, here you have it perfect. I love this side by side. I've seen it before as well. The side by side between Hiroshima and Chicago. I mean, and apparently the first one on the left in Hiroshima, that's the atomic bomb right there, and over there, and
right,
then
exactly.
And here's many almost what is it, 70 years prior. The Chicago is might as well have been the bomb.
Exactly. And it might have been, Frank, who knows? You know, when we look at the how much the historical narrative has been skewed, there's a certain point where I'm like, I don't even know what to believe anymore, because all of this is just so wrong.
Okay, so then let's take a really quick break right there. I'm gonna put you on mute for about 2 minutes. We're gonna go on an intermission, come back in 2 minutes, because I want to talk about that. We're seeing the destruction, we're seeing the World's Fair, and now I want to talk about the mud flood ideas, because of course all of this is about taking the eraser on the chalkboard and saying goodbye to the old, which is of course in this case all supposedly influenced by a higher culture, a higher technology, and then of course hello to the new, which here we are right now, where the old new is now being wiped away for the new, which is all cybernetic humans and everything. We're taking it to the next level. So I guess we're moving in steps here. But ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. Just stay where you are. Don't move a muscle. I'll be right back with Jack of the Observation Lounge. And this is just getting good. Now I'm going to go check your super chats as well to relay some questions to Jack. So get them on in there in the super chats, and we will be right back. Where the hell is it? Oh, there we go.
It's intermission time.
Entering, quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Watch Quite Frankly and stuff.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
All my fellow Franciscans.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly. Quite frankly. We'll be in the gulag with you, Frank.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly.
Yo, what's good, Frank?
Quite frankly.
Quite frankly podcast.
So everybody watch, Quite Frankly, with Frank.
Dare you.
Okay. I'm back here with Jack from the Observation Lounge. Really, really good. You know, Jack, again, great. A lot of people, when they struggle with names and they switch, sometimes they don't do themselves a good service there, changing up all their branding. But I really like the Observation Lounge. That's going to give you a lot of leeway to do some interesting things in the future.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to keep it broad so I wouldn't limit myself moving forward, because there's a lot of different stuff that I want to talk about, and sometimes I don't even have a video planned one day, and the next day I'm like, taken off in a completely different direction.
That's what and how long did it take you to put together the 45-minute dive on Tartaria that came out earlier in the year?
Oh, that must have been close to 100 hours of work to put that all together.
Nice. What a great labor of love, you know? Here you go. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you want to submit some questions for the show, you can send them over in whatever super chat or rant or anything that you got for us. That would be wonderful. Now we're moving right along, and I'll read them all off later on. If they're not questions for the guest, we'll do that later on. Okay, so mud flood time. Where the hell do we go with this one, Jack? Because this is, I was going to ask you, and you, of course, you got to it right away. Who are the Tartarians? Do they have any kind of link with the Atlanteans? Because we are, you know, this has such an Atlantis kind of a feeling. Only thing is, though, that with Atlantis, we have a worldwide cataclysm that is a part of the story in one way or another. And this one just seems to be that Tartaria, with all the greatness, with all of the goodness and the high tech and the high culture that managed to proliferate around the world, it was really just devious men with their cows and their lanterns tipped over that were able to burn down all these great cities and have everybody just forget in 2 generations. So talk to us about the mud flood, because that is the most Atlantean part of this whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it goes along with the what we were talking about before about history probably not being linear, and it's much more likely that history is a cyclic thing, that we have been wiped out repeatedly by cataclysms and continue to be wiped out. So with the Atlantean civilization, we can look at things like the Sphinx of Giza and Robert Schoch's work around the Sphinx, where he talks about how the water erosion patterns on the Sphinx make it clear that this structure, this statue, was existing during or before the last cataclysmic event, before the Younger Trias impact event. So if you look at the global temperature charts, for instance, from the Arctic ice core samples, we see a fluctuation. It's like a pattern of ups and downs, where it appears that we continue to repeatedly go into ice ages and then rapidly come out of ice ages. So we have that scientific evidence, but then we also have religious evidence as well. So we can look at things like the flood myth of Noah. I mean, every ancient culture has a flood myth, but one of the most well-known is obviously in the Bible, and the flood myth of Noah, where there was a great civilization that existed on Earth, which was made God angry and then was wiped out by a great flood, a great cataclysm, and then civilization was reborn following that. I think it's time that we start taking these myths a little more seriously, and understand that this was not just a, biblical fable, but that these events most likely actually happened. And how that ties into the mud flood is, it seems like a repeat or some type of, it almost seems like it is like a smaller flood. It wasn't like a great flood that wiped out everything, but we see a lot of buildings that have been buried or partially buried. One particular one is the Lincoln Memorial. If you look up the picture of the Lincoln Memorial, before the reflecting pool was put in, it's like all this overgrown shrubbery right around the Lincoln Memorial. It looks like it was dug out. Or like the picture on your screen there, where it shows these Greco-Roman style columns being dug out of the dirt. I believe that's Nashville, Tennessee, actually. So we see, all these pictures, and we stumble across it every day, where like a road caves in and there's like a brick tunnel system underneath the road. Or my lunch break again did a great video on Kenosha, Wisconsin, which has a tunnel system connecting all of these old world buildings together that is not disclosed to the public. But he actually went down into these tunnel systems and explored them to a large extent. Another example is the picture on your screen. Like, why are there columns underground? And this one's Nashville right here.
Oh, my bad. Hold on. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. So essentially, well, like this one, the road caves in and there's like a tunnel system that nobody knew about. Or, this picture right here, I believe that's the DC our Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Has these giant foundations and these columns underground. Like, why are there columns underground? And then we see, just walk around any American city and look at these old world buildings, and you'll see like windows that have been built into the ground, and people say, oh, they were just cellars. Well, why would you need a window in a cellar? And it's not just like the partial window. It's like the full window is like underground. It's partially buried.
It definitely is awkward.
It
is awkward. I've seen those things around. And of course, the pictures don't lie. There had to have been something some kind of erosion of the land that moved it in and kind of shifted the geography, everything itself, to be able to swallow all this stuff up. But the question is that if we're talking about something that was so significant, an event that it consumed so much of what is considered, a modern society. I know that it not very. There wasn't a lot of electricity at the time, and not modern in a 2024 sense. But as far as being able to be modern enough to have some visual evidence of the whole thing, a photograph. I mean, once we get into the point in human history where you can take a photograph of something, Jack. I think that's a pretty modern standpoint right there. I just find it so hard that this is not taught a mud flood of that significance, not a regional disaster, but something that consumed a civilization, or at least an area of a continent or subcontinent. That would be something that is taught still pretty thoroughly today.
Well, some researchers that I've come across have suggested that the biblical flood of Noah was actually much more recent than we believe. And this is kind of almost a counter argument to the Younger Dryas impact theory, and that, or maybe possibly in addition to the Younger Dryas impact theory. Again, civilizations rising and falling. We've been, many different human civilizations have been wiped out many times over. But if we look at the biblical story of Noah and this flood, it's possible that it's synonymous with the mud flood theory as well. And, I think that is feasible given all the skewing of the historical narrative that we've seen thus far. If you look at, for instance, the I'm losing my train of thought here.
Well, you know what? Let me try.
Frank.
No, it's okay. Hey, don't worry about it. We're and we have a.
It's been a long day.
Listen, I understand it, and we have a little bit more left because I think that we've done a lot, and I'd love to have you back on to talk about a number of things because like I said, I know that this is not just the only thing that you do, and I love your work. So let me try to trigger your memory in another way because we're in a sense talking about the suppressing of history over here. What are there any organizations? Because it can't just be, the luck of a mud flood and everybody forgets about it. There has to be some sort of an authority that comes in and is hell-bent on making sure that nobody talks about a very recent presence that everybody could feel, the way that the buildings are built, the way that they function, an outlook on the world. What about the Smithsonian? I always hear very dubious, mixed things about the Smithsonian. Are organizations like that ever accused of coming in and being a part of the cover-up or acting in one significant way or another?
Oh, 100%. Have you heard of the story of G.D. Kincaid, who was sent by the Smithsonian into the Grand Canyon?
No.
And so this was a 18th century researcher who sailed down the Grand Canyon, and there was newspaper articles talking about how he found caves that were clearly carved out by advanced tools, and there were Egyptian hieroglyphs all over the walls. And this came out in several news stories and articles, and we still have the articles to this day. And it was quickly swept under the rug, and we're told that, this was just a scam by these newspaper companies who were trying to make a profit off of a fake story. But then you go to the Grand Canyon today. I don't know if you've ever been, Frank, but there are large swaths of it that are blocked off. I mean, you try to explore down them, the black helicopters will come flying by you and prevent you from going any further. So
I want to go. I haven't gone yet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty wild, and I think that and the Smithsonian is just one of these groups. There are probably hundreds of them. I mean, we have Skull and Bones, Illuminati, the Freemasons, and I want to make a disclaimer here for anybody who's maybe part of the Freemasons. I don't believe that everybody within the Freemason society is like part of this cover up. I have friends who are part of this organization. A lot of them get into it because they want some sort of fraternity or communal service aspect of it. I just don't understand the need to take an oath of secrecy to your like why is there a need to swear an oath of secrecy to your brothers or your fraternity? And then all these weird rituals that they do. I don't know if you've seen have you seen Kyle Undercover's video of the 33rd degree Freemason ceremony?
No, I haven't seen it. I gotta watch it.
Oh, you should. I'll send it to you. It is a wild video. He has a hidden camera on, and they're doing this thing with Hiram Abiff, and they're like doing mock sacrifices, and it's really weird and dark stuff. And I just don't understand how anybody who's part of that organization can, be a part of these things and think, this seems kind of dark. Maybe I shouldn't be involved in these type of shenanigans. But then again, a lot of people are just in the mindset that, I want to have, the sense of community and, do community service and things of that nature. And I don't think everybody who's part of that organization is bad. I think it's probably compartmentalized, this knowledge. And, it's only the people at the very, very top who are actually manipulating these things. But a lot of people talk about the Illuminati in Hollywood and in the music industry in particular, which we were talking about before. A lot of modern music has all these weird devil worshiping things in them. Like I was watching a video of The Weeknd, one of his concerts, and I actually enjoyed his music. And I saw this concert, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I can listen to this guy anymore, because he's at a concert and the word Satan is flashing behind him on this big screen. I'm like, what the hell is this? And then you have all these other artists who are dressing up and doing all this satanic worship stuff, and it's just weird, Frank. And again, it's hard to know how to tie all this stuff together sometimes, but it's just, it blows my mind some of these days when I see some of this stuff.
Well, that's the burden of, I have to tie this all together and must connect. And of course, like I said before, that is the difference between even just 24 years ago, the year 2000, prior to at least 9/11, that last gasp of what we all, growing up in the 80s and 90s felt as being normal. And then there's the first big shock trauma to the system. And and then that buffer between consensus reality and the ecocentric, the occult and the so much else, the unseen, it starts really shrinking up there. And then you say, okay, now you're starting to notice things that are on the Grammys every year. You're starting to see these little synchronicities that what the hell do numbers really mean? Then all of a sudden they're haunting you in your dreams. It's an odd thing. And we're talking about Tartaria. This is on a massive scale, because now we're talking about, hey, what is the world that we're living in? And where should we be? And that's the other thing there too, that I would argue, just going back to the World's Fair. After spending so much time, like I said, dealing with the World's Fair last year, the Chicago World's Fair, the bigger conspiracy for me would have been to prevent us from moving forward from where we were during, the preparation for that fair. I mean, so many things were invented out of necessity to make that fair possible in such an incredible amount of time, right down to Tesla's alternating current, leapfrogging over Edison's design to be the official power source of the 1893 World's Fair. There's so much innovation just to make those events possible. I remember several times during that book club saying with all the participants of the book club, the trajectory that we were on in 1893, that leads us somewhere far different from where we are right now, if it weren't for certain interventions. You go outside your house right now and you look up at the sky, before you get to, for most of us at least, before your eyes are able to gaze upon the beautiful night sky, it first has to fight its way through a rat's nest of telephone and power lines. I'm like, why do we still have these things hanging over our heads? the power lines all over the place. So I tend to think that there were likely interventions to prevent us from, experiencing the life that could have been unlocked from what those World's Fairs actually represented. The Tartaria thing doesn't rub me the right way sometimes with the World's Fair stuff, because it presents them as merely reasons to wipe out something that was already there, when at least in Chicago's case, there's nothing there but a sand trap. So I don't know what to make of that. And then the other thing there too for me is that what it really comes down to, like most things, is Occam's razor. Things like global connectivity, a lost, suppressed technology, or the official story of anything. For example, 9/11. It's like a Las Vegas magic show. Most people know that the woman in the box is not actually getting her legs sawed off.
Right.
We just don't know how exactly it was pulled off when we are in the audience. We know that there's a trick here. We know that this is not real, but we don't know exactly how it was pulled off. That's why there's so many people collectively who scoff at the official story of, say, 9/11. But when it comes down to the play-by-play, there's a ton of variable disagreement there. And I think that's what happens when we think about something like Tartaria. I think deep in our gut, we know that our origin stories of our civilization and every other great reset that this planet has had of ancient antiquity, we don't know what the hell it is, either because the data is not actually available anymore, or because we're being lied to. So that's where we are. It's just like we feel it in our gut, but we can't really. What the hell can we really say?
I couldn't put it better myself. I mean, in my opinion, it's hidden all around us, hidden in plain sight. I mean, you just look at the architecture of today versus the architecture of the 1900s. Even if this whole Tartaria theory and everything that we've talked about, the World's Fairs and all that, even if that weren't true, you can just look around you and say something is wrong here. Our society is sick. Why are we building these giant like brutalist architecture office buildings that are glass boxes? The IMP glass boxes that are, in every American city, and they're an eyesore, and they are degrading to the human condition, in my opinion. We have gone in a different direction where we are leaving a past behind that helped elevate the human spirit, not only in the architecture, just the beauty of seeing these things every day and being around these beautiful cities, and hearing the bells, like these urban soundscapes. We've lost that beauty, and it is degrading to the human condition. It's clear that whatever previous civilization existed, even if there wasn't a previous civilization, even if it was just our ancestors, we have gone in a radically different direction that I think is largely sick. I don't see why, with our contemporary, all the tools that we have, we're supposedly so much more advanced than they were in the 1800s, riding around on horse and buggies. Yet the greatest architecture we can produce is a glass box where the interior is cubicles and synthetic drop ceilings and drywall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know, and the air quality, the modern day air conditioning. What the hell is But let me ask you two questions now before we end. The first one is something that I don't know if you've covered it a lot, but I have to ask, because when we talk about Tartaria, we're talking about going back at least 1,000 years or around there. What about the overlap in humanoid species? When I listen to people like Lloyd Pye in the past, or anybody else that will talk about these situations, evolutionary situations that defy all Darwinian ideas of evolution, where we're talking about civilizations that almost like overlap, where there is modern man, and then there's also an overlap where we actually shared time with Neanderthal on the earth, whether you want to call them Nephilim, giants, whatever it is. If we were talking about civilizations this old, then I wonder if there was something written about whether or not modern humans were roaming alongside of Neanderthal or any other humanoid species. Did you ever encounter anything like that along the way, aside from all the lost tech and the architecture? What about lost humanoids?
Absolutely. Well, the Book of Enoch discusses it in great detail, which is now only found in the Ethiopian Bible. It was taken out by of the conventional or canonized Bible by King James. That's the widest, distributed Bible in the world right now. It's the King James Bible. But in the Ethiopian Bible, which was also found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, were parts of the Book of Enoch, which talks about a time when humans like you or I shared the earth with the fallen angels or the Nephilim, or better known as these giants. And that's part of the explanation we kind of have when we look at some of these old buildings that have these giant doors. I call them Nephilim doors because they're so big that it doesn't make sense for, unless they were made for somebody much larger than us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've seen those I've seen those doors. Of course, for me, I just never. I was always just like, wow, well, they really wanted to build big doors. I didn't actually think there must have been big people walking through those doors, but I don't know. I had to ask you because I tend to think that there's probably more and more like that being a reality than we think. Oh, so then I guess here's my big question for you as we depart for the evening. You say in the work that you've done that 2024 is going to be with great confidence. You say it. 2024 is going to be an age of great awakening. That things like this are going to come, especially the story of Tartaria, and at least enough evidence are going to be brought to the public awareness that it's going to further inspire new rounds of questioning. Do you really, with so much at stake, especially in a year like this, what kind of you? It seems like your hopes are high for the future. Is that what you're maintaining? High hopes?
Absolutely. I mean, you need to stay optimistic because in many ways people manifest their own reality. And when I see people who are manifesting like nuclear destruction or like apocalypse, like these preppers who are, I'm not saying it's not good to, prepare, hope for the best and prepare for the worst, but a lot of people are stuck in this news cycle of doom and gloom every day where they either, think that the Republicans are ruining the world or that the Democrats are ruining the world, or that we're going to get in some type of nuclear apocalypse. And if you are constantly internalizing this and thinking about the idea that there's going to be nuclear Armageddon, I think it's more likely to happen. I mean, there's a great Star Trek quote, Frank, where Guinan is talking to Riker in the episode Best of Both Worlds. Your audience might be familiar with this, but she says to him, if a man is convinced he's going to die tomorrow, he'll probably find a way to make it happen. And I truly believe those words. I think even though that's, just a fantasy show, I think wiser words have never been spoken.
Oh, he'll probably find a way to make it happen. That's a good one. That's a good one. Sometimes there are just some lines that stick with you. They really do. Well, listen, Jack, the Observation Lounge, I've got you tagged in the description of the episode. I hope more people go and subscribe to you, and I'm looking forward to having you on again. We'll talk off air about future subjects because these are wonderful deep dive nights for especially summer nights.
Yeah, this was a great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on, Frank.
And I hope that people reach out to you and ask questions and all that. I'm going to open up the lines for questions afterwards just to see what's going through some people's minds, and we'll see what happens there. You've given us a lot to think about, and at least I'm a lot clearer on the story than I was before. You brought a lot of really great history, especially military history too. That's all verifiable. Of course, I should just drive that home again, that as far as Tartaria as an Eastern establishment and there being real military conflict and territories gained and lost and all that, that is a real thing. We are really just wondering how far outside of that testing ground did all of their architecture and everything else make its way, and who was doing the suppressing if there was a suppression there. Now, there's a religious angle to it that I didn't bring up with you. That I'll play a small video after the fact. There's a religious, especially a Christian angle about the millennial reign of Christ, and that has often been mixed in with this story that I want to get to. So I'll just play that. I have a quick 2.5 minute thing here, unless you have something you want to say about it before you go, because you don't bring that up in any of your dives. So I don't know if that's something you wanted to touch.
It's something that I genuinely need to do more research on, Frank, is that the theory of the millennial reign.
Yeah, listen, there's nothing really. You want to talk about the evidence of a mud flood, and I'm like, okay, well, I mean, you think that it would be even harder to find any kind of evidence that Jesus himself was reigning for 1,000 years this whole time. And, it's one of those things where, hey, I love the stories. Let's get on into it. But we're going to have to get some meat and potatoes at some point. But still, we'll get around to that sometime. Thank you so much for everything you've already given us tonight, Jack. It's great to have you on.
Thanks so much, Frank. Have a great night.
All right. Take care. There you go. Jack from the Observation Lounge. He's definitely was very gracious with his time. We have a really quick break. When we come back, your calls right up until the end. 914-200-0269. 914-200-0269. Get the phones riled up. Let's go. Let's go.
Hey, want to start your day fresh and stimulate your taste buds at the same time? Try the Quite Frankly Elevation Blend Coffee, brought to you by the Coffee Revolution in Davenport, Iowa. An uplifting mix of Ethiopian, Mexican, and Peruvian estate beans and roasted to first crack. Guaranteed to have you coming back for more. And as if you needed more reason to enjoy a fresh pot, did you know that healthy consumption of caffeine has been linked with longevity, lower risk of cardiovascular disease, boosts progesterone, increases in thyroid function, increases in metabolism, mood, and even testosterone after working out? And here's some free advice. Upon waking, drink at least 12 ounces of water with some sea salt. This will leave you hydrated and energized, and then an hour later, have your first cup of Quite Frankly Elevation Blend Coffee. You will feel like moving mountains and making babies. So choose a smooth, organic light roast with my stupid face on the bag to inject some life into your daily routine. Quite Frankly Elevation Blend Coffee is linked at the affiliates page on quitefrankly.tv.
So what don't you want?
Pardon?
What don't you want?
Oh, well, I think I'll just,
I've been working here for 44 years. Ain't nobody ever ordered nothing but T-bone steak and a baked potato. Except this one asshole from New York tried to order trout back in 1987. We don't sell no goddamn trout. T-bone steaks. So either you don't want the corn on the cob, or you don't want the green beans. So what don't you want?
I don't want green beans.
I don't want green beans either.
Steaks cooked medium rare.
Can I get my steak cooked just
That want no question.
All right.
Okay, and remember, ladies and gentlemen, all the coffee that you buy from now all throughout Sunday, because it's Mother's Day, it's like 7% off, and then all of your names are put into a running for one of those $350 coffee machines that Paige at Coffee Revolution is going to do the drawing on Monday morning. So get some coffee. I'm not good at selling things, but let me tell you something. The coffee sells itself. It's so damn tasty. Can't take it anymore. I actually hate the coffee because it tastes so good, and I can't stop. And it cleans me out. Please stop it. All right, so what the are we doing here? I have something I want to show you. But first, we're going to your super chats. I want to get those out of the way quick. There's no tips on Rockfin. Hello to quitefranklysuperchat.com. Jay Brits and Stove are waiting for me. Dynamic duo. Thank you guys so much. Keeping the lights on just because of you two alone. Great show, great guest. Thanks, Frank. Thank you. Jay Brits, thank you, Stove. Over on quitefrankly.tv, the gold pills, powered by Foxhole. Thank you all, love you guys. Not my name, says cheers, Francis. Thank you. Swickly says, finally, a hole that is too deep for me even. Damn, Swickly, calm down there, boy. C. Blanche, thank you. Sean Joe, Porpoiseful, Harley Quinn 369, J2 Dank, Robert Sarnes, and Sean Joe. It's wonderful to have you guys there. On the Rumble, surprised people are even... The Rumble, I'll tell you something, man. Rumble, you got to prove to me that you guys are real. You have to prove to me that there's really real people watching me on Rumble. 2,000, nearly 2,000 people on that stream alone, and the chat room is running like there are 10 people in there. Something just don't feel right. I got to tell you. I'm talking about the regular chat too, not Rumble rants, whatever, you know, just weird. It's very weird. All right, so here's what I got for you. I'm going to put the number up so I can take your calls, and then I have to get a few things on the record here. All right, now the first one is from Robert Sepper. Now I asked Robert about this because in the past, as you all know, I mean, Robert Sepper is a very, very well-known anthropologist and very, very based. So you can go check him out. I put his stuff in the Sunday stream quite a bit. But in the past, I thought that I had asked Robert about the theory, the Tartaria theory, and he had dismissed it outright. But now that I think about it, I think it was Timothy Alberino who dismissed it outright. However, Sepper did come at this from a purely anthropological standpoint, which mostly stays focused on the Far East. So I asked him about this, and he said this. Hold on, let me put the window capture up there, get this out of the way, and that's the gilded. Robert said, I don't think I dismiss it outright, as I have 2 videos on it myself. I must have meant in the context of a mud flood or in racial context, such as this in this example on the right. On the right is the Chinese depiction of Genghis Khan's grandson. The left is the accurate one. The Tartarian emperors or Mongols were Aryans. Okay? He said the wipeout is because it occupied the geographic territory of modern China and Russia, both of which endured communism, which erases history. The history being erased is because it is Aryan, Caucasian, like the first emperors of China, as their legend speaks of bearded white men with deep-set blue eyes, etc. And in Russia, it was Jewish Bolshevism instigated situation over there. The same way swastikas are being removed, or we are being told that they are all just coincidence, not part of a homogenous global empire. It's not mud flood, it's anti-white Marxist BS. It's not a cataclysm, it's communism. So that's from Robert Sepper. That's some high quality commentary right there. And then we have this that I want to throw out just for the hell of it. This is from the Tartaria Lives Twitter account, and it's a whole thread on before and after. And this is, you know, it's pretty stark. Here you go. A 1910 to a 2019. I don't know where this is actually. You see that more classical, and then of course the rounded arena type thing. I don't know where that is. But there's more. You see the before and after, the classical, and then, of course, just the McDonald's construction. Here you go. Where is this? Chamberlain Square, Birmingham. 1912. Very, very classy. 2007, you can see that post-World War II brutalism. It almost looks like a Soviet building. Just things going away. You know? I understand it. I understand what people say. I mean, it's still, you can still see the old world, kind of the footprint of the old world in the new world, but there's a lot that is left. There's a lot that is wanting there. Now, architecture, visual arts, that all flows downhill from the hearts and minds of man. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. That's why when we call attention to the ugliness of so much mainstream modern art, it makes sense that it would be a reflection of how the culture has been poisoned by that deconstructionist Frankfurt School way of seeing the world. The subjective truth, the therefore rejection of traditional standards of beauty comes along with that. It's subverting expectations, all that other stuff. So I can see it two ways or 5 ways different from everything else. Anyway, you call in now. We have about 15 to 20 minutes left, and I want to know what you think about this. First call is from Guatemala. What is going on there? What do you think about the subject tonight?
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, sorry. I'm sitting here watching you. It's Simone calling you from Guatemala.
Yes.
This is a great show. You had a great guest on tonight. This was awesome.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed.
Was really jumping.
Thank you. I'm glad everybody enjoyed. Is there anything now? I don't know if you're familiar with this or not. So regardless of where you're
Totally. Been following it for years.
So then what do you think?
So ask me something.
Ask you something? No.
No, I'm very familiar with it. I've been traveling. Well, I quit now, but I've been all the way down to Bolivia and seen all of these, all these Tartarian buildings. And a lot of these places are like in the middle of nowhere, seemingly. Especially like Peru and Bolivia. I don't know what happened there, but you'll see nothing, and then you'll have like a big city out in the middle of nowhere with all the cathedrals and these buildings. It's pretty phenomenal. Not that many, but and I think a lot of them too. They say founded on it, and I was like, okay, I do believe that means they found it.
So wait, so let me. Okay, well, to make this more relevant to the point, because it's one that it's not really, that's not so suspicious to me to say, all right, well, there's nothing, and then all of a sudden a city planner looked out and surveyed a great swath of land and said, I can see a community, I can see a city built right here, and then 100 years later, the vision has come true. But when it comes to what we're talking about tonight, do you have any insight into whether or not this city was built on a ley line or some kind of anything, or are the spires and all of the domes all the same in there? Is there something that is very, very unique to the Tartaria thread that is in these cities, seemingly budding out of nowhere, that makes you think that way?
The domes, the ley lines. I do know. I know the ley lines of a certain group of cathedrals that are built in the UK. It is said, I'm not versed on the ley lines in South and Central America. I'm in Guatemala. I don't think we have ley lines exactly over us, but they're close. But the Tartarian architecture, the domes and those windows, and tall doors, like 20, 34, 30-foot tall doors. That seems to be a consistent architectural design trait that is not necessary in these days. And again, it's interesting to me. I used to be really angry about learning that we've been lied to, but now it's more interesting to see the progression of people coming into this.
Okay.
We still have to go to work tomorrow, whatever it is, but it's still interesting to open up these doors and look in and go, hey, oh, look, that isn't what we're told, And I see this just as a beautiful little stepping stone for a lot of people, But there's a consistency through this Tartarian, whatever. I actually have a map from 1637 that shows California as a map. I'm sorry, no, 1437 shows California as an island. I have that map.
Wow, you're gonna have to scan that and send it to me, or take a picture or something and send it to me. I'd like to see that.
It's just small. It's really small. Okay, I'll try to do that and send it to your email. I've done that before. So yeah, I will. It's a truck.
Please do that.
And the writing's too small really to read it.
Right.
Much of it, but
on your point there about there being, it's good to wake up to all this stuff and maybe from one day to the next, not really thinking that there is anything to really be excited about or dig into, and is this just really all it is? That's why I like these conversations, because more often than not, you find something else to go and investigate, and maybe you put something on the back burner, or maybe you completely dismiss it, or you debunk it, or either you find a reasonable explanation for what the mystery was. But regardless, it is a wonderful exercise. Exercising healthy skepticism and giving yourself little investigations, fun things that take you out of the rigmarole of day-to-day life I think is one of the greatest things you can do for yourself. Okay. Now cynicism, where everything is bullshit. Everything is bullshit, including the theories themselves that try to explain everything else that's bullshit. Then you're just a hamster in a shitty wheel. You're not really gaining anything there. You're just kind of spinning out, spurging out, and flaking away. Now, before we start getting really, really tight on time, listen to this. Here is Yomikez, I don't know. It's a pretty big channel on YouTube. Almost 700,000 subscribers, talking about Tartaria and Jesus' millennial reign. This is a big part of this for a lot of you out there who already know this story. And I knew that I had known Jack's work very well, and I knew that this was not a part of it. But there has been, and I grabbed this video because it's 2.5 minutes. It's a nice bite-sized introduction to the concept. There's miles more from where this came from on this particular chapter of it all. But listen to this, okay? This is about Tartaria. Here we go.
There's this very interesting theory about the millennial reign of Jesus. It's this time when Jesus will come down to earth and rule for 1,000 years. But in this theory, this 1,000 years has already happened. You see, many people actually believe that Jesus already came back and ruled here on the earth. But here's my only question. If this glorious kingdom really happened in the past, then wouldn't we see evidence of this, like, everywhere? Well, there is this other theory called the Tartarian mud flood. It's this legend of this ancient, advanced empire that stretched across the entire world until one day this empire just vanishes and Tartaria becomes nothing but this old, forgotten myth. But this actually gets much, much weirder, because recently people have been pointing out something very interesting about our own cities. You see, a lot of these buildings are really just sitting on much older constructions. Of course, this is no secret, but I have to agree that these buildings do seem like they're covering up some kind of history. Okay, now stay with me, because in 1851, there was this new thing going around called World Expos. And different countries all around the world were building these massive constructions just to host these World Expos. And you gotta understand that millions of people attended these things. But what is just absolutely confusing is that right after the event, everything would be destroyed. All of these beautiful, supposedly new buildings from 1851 to about the 1930s, almost every single one of them was completely destroyed. But this is what these World Expos looked like. This is Philadelphia in 1876. This is Chicago in 1893. This is St. Louis in Missouri. This is 1904. These buildings kind of look like ancient Roman-style buildings. And again, they were all destroyed. See, it's almost as if they're trying to remove the evidence of an empire that stretched across the entire world. A lost empire that would completely throw off our history. And some people even think that is what World War I and II was all about. Just clearing the slate so they could rewrite the timeline. Now, this really is nothing but a theory. But I do have just one more curious question. You see, the Bible says that after this 1,000 years, Satan will be released to deceive the world just one last time. And if we are in that time now, then what kind of lies would the devil have told us?
You know, so it's a very quick recap of a lot of the things that Jack talked about tonight. The mud flood, the World Fair, but it just brings in this bigger, and there's more to that. There's more to that. There's sections of this theory that, if I remember correctly, where there are hundreds of, maybe like up to 300 years that has been replaced or eliminated. that it's not actually 2024, it's actually 1724 right now, or something like that. And I don't ask me anything more. I mean, there's no time to ask me anything right now. But I have a lot of questions. I still have a lot more than that. There's huge amount of stuff. Here. Look at this one. Here's an anti-electricity ad from the year 1900. And that's all the reasons why I think that electricity is the fact that it has not gotten better for us 124 years later. That maybe we look up at the average telephone pole and things have been a little bit more tidy, that the quality of cable is a little bit better, the transformers, things are just a little bit more stable. But the fact that we look up and we can still, by and large, see this stuff, all this voltage just buzzing over our heads is something else. Talk about lost time, suppressed technology. And I don't know. There's more there. Let's take a call from Austin, Texas. What's going on, 512?
Yo, this is Problematic Will, Frank. What's going on?
What's up, Will? How you doing? Will, you there? Will? 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 I don't know what's going on. Let's try to call him back.
Hello, good evening.
What the hell was that? Hello, baby? Did somebody just say hello, baby? Will, is this you?
I'm sorry, man. My little fat cheek hit the mute button. So real quick.
Okay. Wait. I just called somebody.
During the millennial reign of Christ, the curse will be reversed. Meaning the nature that was that has been cursed will no longer. So we won't have weeds, lions won't kill antelopes. And, that's one of the things it's a few things about this theory that just was like, nah. That a couple of red flags that popped up. That's one of them as far as the millennial reign. And also, when you look at 2 Thessalonians, it says to see to it that you have not be deceived. So the devil is out here. He's deceiving still, but there's a lot of deception. But it's not to the point where, because, he will be bound for 1,000 years. That hasn't happened yet. So we can see clearly throughout history the hand of, nefarious things going on. And
Will, let me ask you something. Why have you found? Because I know you study this far more than I have. Why is it that we're talking about 1,000-year trade-offs? We're gonna do our thing, and then you'll have 1,000 years, and then you're going back in the box. And what is that? What is that partnership like? That dual? How have you come to understand that pretty much partnership between the light and the dark? Because it doesn't.
It's not a partnership. God is in control. Satan is God's adversary. He's playing his role essentially, but he has it out there because this is the thing. Like, we as humans have received grace, where the angels who have sinned and made bad decisions to rebel, they don't receive any of that grace. So we have the ability to repent and to get it right, whereas though the adversaries, they don't have that opportunity. But in the millennial reign, it's just kind of just showing the heart of man. Even in a perfect situation, there will still be some that will just choose evil. So in heaven, everything was perfect, but you had some that just decided to rebel. And the same thing was going to happen in during the millennial kingdom. Everything will be, there will be peace on earth. Agriculture, need. Imagine no weed. You don't have to weed anything anymore. I mean, it's going to be the best of the best, but there's still going to be people who refuse to worship God, and those people, the Bible says, they're not going to get rain. They're not going they're going to be cursed because they. And another thing about the millennial reign, during that time, the ages will be, people will be living back, 3, 4, 5, 600, 700, 800 years. And this is a verse in scripture that says that the baby, the child, the youngest will die at 100. And they'll be like, oh man, he was rebellious. He only lived to 100 because they chose not to, serve the one, serve. But it's not a trade-off.
Okay.
It's, God is a loving God. He's giving people time to repent, giving people time to, now is a great waking up time for a lot of folks in the world, and especially America. People are having an opportunity to be like, really look and see the two choices of, which different paths which you can go, light and darkness, and everything is real clear.
Yeah.
But some people just need time. So I feel like I'm rambling.
No. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. People need time. People need time. All right. This is something, and I knew that this particular sliver of the story, which is a big one, I really wish I could have been able to introduce it a little bit earlier in the broadcast, but because I knew it would elicit some really interesting response, especially with people like you out there, Will. Hey, real quick before we get off, I went to call you back, and because I'm the first call just kind of dropped, I went to call you back, and a woman picked up and said, "Hey, baby." Who the hell was that?
Bro, this is a text now number. This is not even my real number.
Oh, okay. Well, I called.
So I don't even.
Okay.
That was weird. I wish I had someone else, a woman that could pick up my line.
Listen, you gotta go back. You have to go back and listen to that what just happened, because I called your line back.
That's interesting. It's all like internet calling, man. These voice over ISPs. It's lines get crossed.
Yeah.
So I'm not. It's probably just a weird internet thing. I don't know.
All right.
But yeah, this is a text now number, so this is like a disposable number.
Cool. All right, man. So, well, listen, hope you have a good night, and thanks for the call.
Yeah, peace.
All right, take care. Okay, so here we go. All right. Let me get to the super chats, make sure that we get everybody in. Jay Britz and Stowstube, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Sean Joe, Robert Sarnes, J2 Dank over on quitefrankly.tv. I'm going to release the scratching over there. You guys have been fantastic. Thank you all so much. And remember that the best way to watch the show from beginning to end, quitefrankly.tv, powered by Foxhole and Pilled. The gold pill, it's just a really fun way of contributing to the show and helping support the vision for the network, which is, had to go back to the drawing board on some stuff, but still wonderful to have you all out there. What else do I have on the Rumble rants over here? There's one that came in. No Eva Braun said, "Is someone spoofing your number, bro? That was that hello baby thing." Yeah, I know. I don't know. I have to go back and say hello baby. It's crazy. Said, Will? What is going on? What the hell is going on? Alrighty, that's that. Have a wonderful evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow night, we have... Who's coming on with me? Oh, tomorrow night, we got a little bit of a nostalgia kind of show. The Time We Never Knew. A Time We Never Knew. We're doing a full read-through of that tomorrow. Obviously, I will put in some other things, too. I want to talk about the schizophrenia link to demonic possession thing. I want to throw that out there because that has ties to the Monday night show that came up loosely last night. So we'll get a little mix of things in. We'll peruse the headlines, make sure we're up to date with all the ridiculousness out there, especially. What's really sad? No matter what the hell you think is going on in your life, you can be so happy that you're not somebody out there like Mark Hamill, who thinks that the Stormy Daniels trial with Donald Trump is the trial of our lifetimes. And of course, he's coming from the standpoint that this is the trial that could finally put Donald Trump away and save us all. Okay? Just be happy. Whatever's going on in your life, at least you can hold on to that that you don't have fucking oatmeal for brains like Mark Hamill. Anyway, I'll see you guys tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Tell your friends, tell your family. I'll be here. We'll be taking calls. And for anybody who did not get through tonight, email me, quitefranklypodcast@gmail.com. I'd like to know what the hell's going on with you all and how you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Jack from Picard's Ready Room. We will see you tomorrow night. Good night.
I'll catch you on the flip side.
Go home and sleep with my wife.